we believe that food access is not only dependent upon a healthy planet, but a healthy planet can enable food access. Our food system is deeply connected to the ability of our planet to keep balance.
Today, my guest is Julia DeSantis, a recent college grad who is head of sustainability and development coordinator for the Farmlink Project, one of the most exciting nonprofits I've come across. They are working to alleviate hunger, protect the environment, and change the future of food waste in the United States, and is nearly 100% college and high school student run. In the early months of the pandemic, when schools and businesses were closing down, 2 college students were sent home to finish the year remotely, and they had a big idea. Watching news reports showing tons of food being destroyed because there were not enough workers to deliver it, alongside other reports of people waiting in long food lines to receive assistance, they just decided to take a simple but bold move. One of them just asked, why don't we pick up the food that's getting tossed into the landfill and take it to the people who need the food? And that's what they did. Now, just 3 years later, that idea has grown into the Farmlink Project, a student-led organization that thus far has delivered 118 million pounds of food to food banks and kept over 173,000 tons of carbon emissions from entering the atmosphere, where it would otherwise contribute to global warming. This is a deeply inspiring story that I think will touch you on so many levels. So please press that subscribe button, and if you're feeling it, leave a review. And here is my interview with Julia DeSantis. Hi, Julia DeSantis. How are you?
I'm doing so well, Deborah. How are you?
I'm great. I'm so excited. First of all, welcome to the podcast. I'm thrilled to have you on. And I think there's just like so many great things that you guys are doing that I can't wait to talk about. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's a privilege and pleasure to be with you and talk a little bit about what we care about at the Farmlink Project.
We definitely care about the Farmlink Project. I had not heard of it actually until recently, and I suspect that many people watching, listening have not heard of it. So we're going to go and start at the very beginning and go through the whole process. But just to start, you were the head of sustainability and development and development coordinator, right, for the Farmlink Project, which, as your website says, is fighting food insecurity is your mission, and repurposing surplus produce is your solution. Mm-hmm. Cuts to the chase, says it all right there. I love that. But first, I want to kind of get rid of the elephant in the room, which is your last name, and I have to ask, any relation?
Let's cover it.
Let's cover it. Is this your uncle, your father? You're running for president on the Republican ticket?
Just when you think you're really making a name for yourself, someone.
What happened?
No,
who is it?
I have no relationship to Ron DeSantis, to my knowledge. There turns out to be many DeSantis in the United States and Italy, where my dad's side of the family is from. However, no relation and no affiliation either.
Well, I suspect you may get asked that question a few thousand times in the next couple of years. Maybe not. But anyway, we'll pass that along. Well, let's start by explaining what the Farmlink Project is and what it does. And I think just to kick it off, I think we can talk about the primary issue around which it was built, which is or the issue is billions of pounds of produce are going to waste while millions of Americans are going hungry. That's the issue, right? Absolutely. So let's talk about what Farmlink does. And we'll get into the backstory in a few minutes, but why don't we just talk about what the project actually is first?
Absolutely. Yeah, so we produce, it's pretty incredible. Our world produces enough food to feed the global population nearly 2 times over. And that is an incredible feat that we celebrate. However, at the same time, there is raging food insecurity rampant around the world, and right here in the United States happening at the same time. So it's the ultimate dichotomy of an abundance and scarcity model that we believe can be solved by treating one with the other. So we have an abundance of nutritious, fresh produce that is grown in the United States every year.
Mm-hmm.
And we currently waste 20 billion pounds early on in the supply chain of fresh, nutritious produce. And we have about 34 million Americans who are food insecure in the United States. And there's something called the hunger gap, the meal gap. And it's a way to understand how many meals it would take to make sure everyone had access to nutritious food year in and year out. And currently in the United States, that's 6.4 billion. So it's less than 5% of what is going to waste can actually feed and, meet the meal gap.
Wait. Let me see if I heard that right. Less than 5% of what we throw away would cover the meal gap?
That's right.
That's phenomenal. That's a phenomenal statistic.
It's absolutely exciting. It's an opportunity that Farmlink recognized in the height of COVID. It was really what pulled the curtain on this issue that has been around for decades here in the United States. But really, the pandemic exacerbated existing shadow problems where overproduction of food is part of the food systems design here. And it's an exciting opportunity that we can now connect the surplus to food bank partners across the United States that are serving our neighbors to make sure that everyone has access to nutritious food.
So, wow, I love the positive way that you frame everything, that rather than that being a tragedy, that's a very exciting thing, because it is once you've realized and acted on that opportunity, then it becomes exciting. And I suspect that you have maybe a little bit, later we'll talk about the future and how you see this going into the future. But anyway, the positivity that right away almost we could solve this issue, which is 5% of the waste. It's I know that during the pandemic, well, at least in the U.S., the statistics I saw said that I read said that I think it's like maybe 1 in 10 roughly in 2021 were food insecure in the U.S. But what really threw me, and I'd heard that, but what really threw me is to see that in 2022, last summer, with inflation, at least what I read, and I think it's Robert Wood Foundation, the last word in that. Anyway, it was on NPR that let's see, it had risen, it had doubled. The hunger had doubled.
Absolutely.
And that's and we were coming out of the pandemic at that point, but so it's just something else came in to kind of swing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're touching on a really important part that we recognize at the Farmlink Project, is that there are many factors that perpetuate this problem. And so anything that has to do with food is going to be intersectional. And as the head of sustainability, that's really important to me. And our philosophy and strategy is that we recognize the many different layers and forces that influence someone's ability to have access to food. And we do our best to always look at this holistically and make sure that we understand that this is a complex problem that might require a set of complex solutions, but we like to distill things into the most simple terms to really understand really what are the biggest barriers to this access. But you're absolutely right. And let me just also point out in the light of intersectionality, the rates of food insecurity are also disproportionately affecting different populations.
Right.
So right on average, it's 1 in 10. And in the time of the pandemic, that heightened, and as well as in the wakes of the pandemic, it's still in high demand, or food is in high demand at food banks. But 1 in 3 Los Angeles citizens are food insecure. I went to school at the University of Southern California, and it really was where I was most exposed to the reality of food insecurity and food deserts. And it's very important that we also paint the picture in detail, where different populations are absolutely experiencing this more severely than others, which is also a key part of what Farmlink is focusing on with our distribution strategy to make sure that we are servicing those agency partners that are in remote places, that are in food deserts.
That's
so
great.
those most neglected from our charitable food system and food system at large are being met where they are.
Boy, that is fantastic. And I hadn't like discovered all that about your organization, but that makes me really happy because I know that like when maybe 1 in 20 or maybe 20, let's say 1 in 5, I guess we should say, have become food insecure last summer anyway, that was more like 30% for Black and Hispanic populations averaged together. I think that those and I know Native American populations have also really suffered, especially during COVID. So yeah, the fact that you're looking at that holistically and looking at it, breaking it down by neighborhood or by, I don't know if you're breaking it down by race and ethnicity, but however you're doing it, to look at the whole picture is so critical. And you're right, those food, because this is kind of the case, is kind of jumping off subject a little bit, but I've kind of come across this new discovery too with like people that are serving populations around the world where there's some kind of an emergency, like maybe an earthquake or, whether it's war or, refugee situation. And always the big organizations tend to show up in the city, the major cities, and say, okay, here we are, everybody come and get your help. And like some of them are like, wait, we're nowhere near the cities. We have no way to get there. And I think that's what always falls apart at the end of these. It's always that last mile in the chain, right? That breaks everything.
Yeah, and that's the definition of a food desert, is the access to fresh, nutritious food or supermarkets that can provide that access is, I don't have the number right, so I'll have to look into this, but there's a mileage threshold that considers a certain city or community within a food desert. And that's something that we recognize is part of the design of our cities. And we recognize that there are barriers there are reasons why food deserts exist in certain places over others, not just because people live remotely. So there's absolutely the intention to make sure that we can connect with those agency partners that are so immersed in those communities, so that we can help create pathways of fresh food to communities where they are. So that way it's not just this centralized distribution. It really can tap into those networks.
I think this speaks to the youth of your organization, that you're changing the paradigm right out of the gate. Because you're right, you could be food insecure if you can't walk or you can't get out. You're food insecure if the grocery store is 2 blocks from you, right?
Right.
Or yeah, so the definitions, we can't rely on old definitions like, oh, you're out in the country or whatever. This is kind of the traditional ways I think that it's been looked at. And the other thing is, and I know you're focused mostly on the United States, which I want to ask you about, but worldwide, this problem has really exacerbated in the last few years. I heard an interview with what is his name, David Beasley. He was the head of the UN World Food Program, and he just stepped down, but he was there for 6 years and made a big impact. But he's saying, things come along like climate shock and like the war in Ukraine and other local wars and a lot of different things, where, even worldwide, that number when he took over, I think he said 6 years ago, there were 80 million facing food insecurity on the planet, if you want to call it that. And it's 254 million today. So it went from 80 million to 254 million. It's almost like a 200% increase. That's with all this effort being put into it. So worldwide, you see that volatility is like even greater than it is here right now. It depends what happens in the US. But anyway, so that's just, is that so speaking to that, is that, I did see somewhere that you were working in 3 countries besides the US, and that might have been an older report. So what are those countries, and are you still, and what's that going to look like in the future?
Absolutely. The problem is global, and we know there is absolutely the need in every country. And we hope that Farmlink can be a model and really be a resource to other students or young change makers around the world that are recognizing these problems in their communities and their countries. We are in no way fit to make those solutions for local, for their specific food system challenges. But we are so excited to now be 3 years in to be able to share our teachings and takeaways and be able to hand over a set of questions that potentially they can ask when navigating solving that problem for their community and their culture. Because that's the best thing about food, is that it's universal, but it's deeply diverse. It's so
and local.
culturally
It's very
relevant.
local. Yeah,
exactly. So there is so much opportunity in learning from our model, but we know that we just have to connect with partners around the world that can service their specific needs. But yeah, our specific international involvement so far has been in Mexico and Canada. So we had a situation in Mexico where we were notified of 20 million pounds of bananas that there was a cold
20
weather
million?
patch. 20 million
That's
pounds
of
of
bananas.
Yeah.
I could go on. Didn't mean to interrupt, but trying to visualize that.
Yeah. It's an absurd amount of bananas. And we were told that they were rejected from the distributor because of a cold weather patch that twinged some brown on the peels, but they were perfectly good to eat and freshly picked. They weren't even off onto the trucks yet.
They're probably still green, right?
Yeah, they were beautiful.
Yeah.
Whole bunches. And we pretty much had an emergency mission where we sent 20 million bananas to distribute to with BAMX, which is the Mexican Food Banking Network. And so we had the opportunity to partner with them and make sure that we could help facilitate the logistics for that distribution to make sure that those bananas didn't go to waste. So that's the most recent involvement in Mexico. Yeah.
Huh. And what was Canada? Was that just another random, like a one-off type situation?
I don't know how many in terms of frequency thus far with Canada, but I do know that has been most recent. And they're definitely within our network of agency partners as well.
Well, physically, you can just drive there, so it makes a big difference. So I want to shift gears just a little bit now and talk about the intersection. I wonder if you can explain sort of you keep using this word intersectionality. So can you explain the intersection of food rescue, food access, and sustainability, which we'll talk maybe a little bit about what your background is, but that's definitely part of your educational background, at least. So why does it matter? Why does that intersectionality matter?
Absolutely. Oh gosh, it's my favorite thing to talk about. The intersectionality of food access, food sustainability, and sustainability on the whole all wraps up into this beautiful container of this planet that we find ourselves on, right? Our food system is dependent upon the health of our planet, because our planet operates on these systems that facilitate the growth and rebirth and death cycles of all living things. And so our food system is deeply connected to the ability of our planet to keep balance, to facilitate those systems of growth. And so no other population knows that better than our farmers, our growers, who really are most intimately interacting with the cycles of nature. And so at the Farmlink Project, we of course work so closely with our growers, because they are not only harvesting, but they are responding and interacting with nature every day to adjust their harvest cycles to be able to provide and feed families around the world. And so food access, Farmlink's ability to enable food access, is directly dependent upon our planet's health. And our planet's health is currently not doing so well. It's out of balance, and it's due to an increase of greenhouse gases that's accelerating warming. And there's a whole trickle down and cascading effects because of this warming that directly affects our ability to feed people in the long term and have stable living environments to create meaningful, thriving lives. So we believe that food access is not only dependent upon a healthy planet, but a healthy planet can enable food access. So it's all a symbiotic relationship, which is the beauty of nature itself, is that it is one that thrives by feeding another life form.
Sure.
And so we are both an advocate for access to nutritious food, but we know in order to effectively do that, we must be an advocate for a stable living planet, to provide and nurture the food that we love and know so well.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that was so well said, and I really appreciate that, giving that bigger frame around it, because we could jump, and maybe will, into the point that this food that is being thrown out every year, which farmers have to throw away because they produce more food than they can ship sometimes. So there's so many situations, right, where they may have produced all this food, like the case of the bananas, but it happens with onions and eggs and milk and everything. They can't afford to ship it themselves, or they don't have the
time.
That's the word I'm trying to find. Well, the time or the chain, but
yes.
or the setup, they don't have the connections. That's not what they do. They're supposed to grow it, and then when they can't find a source for it for whatever reason, they throw. It's easier and cheaper to throw it away. But when they throw it away, right, it goes into the landfill or wherever it goes, and here come the greenhouse gases. I think I saw that food that is thrown out is like the third largest emitter of greenhouse gases worldwide.
That's right.
After China and the U.S., which was such a funny way to juxtapose those two things. But that gives it's like a nation of itself, almost, in terms of quantity, just thrown out wasted food. So the fact that you pull that all together, I mean, this as a sustainability director, that has to. This is your thing, right? This is probably the main thing that you focus on, I would think.
Absolutely. And you've brought up exactly the magnitude of this issue and the opportunity that Farmlink has and continues to have by growing and working with other farmers that are continuing to donate their abundance of food that they would otherwise have to throw out. Is that if Farmlink didn't pick up and recover the 118 million pounds of food that we have to date, over 380 million pounds of carbon equivalents of emissions would have gone to the atmosphere. And that's about 173,000 tons or so. Just looking at it earlier, it's something it's a daily update.
I mean, and sometimes that's a hard thing for people who aren't really connected to how much that looks like. But, like, I don't know how if we can put that into some kind of terms about how many airplane rides that is or how many cars on the road, but it's a lot.
I can tell you. I actually have a calculator right here. Because
you can calculate that? I can't calculate that.
Well, you bring up like exactly what I studied, which is climate communications. And it was when I realized or really absorbed the weight of the research coming out of the IPCC and the severity of our climate crisis. I recognize, why does it take 4 years of education for me to be able to understand this, let alone communicate in simple terms? We don't have time like that. We don't have time. So we need to find ways to make this information
tangible,
accessible and tangible and human. And that's what scientists do so well. They're incredible researchers, and we as communicators and platform builders and connectors, it is our job to share the knowledge in accessible ways to inspire action. And so I love that you just brought up, how can we, orient this statistic? And so I'll just put it in for us.
I know that, scientists have been screaming for years. So they have been telling us what's happening for years, but they don't speak. And that's not, again, like the farmers, it's not their job to transport things. The scientists, it's not their job to communicate things. Like they have done their job, right? So pass it to the communicators and let communicators get the word out, which is what we're doing right now. So I appreciate the fact that you're here and helping do that so much.
Absolutely. So I just found that for 118 million pounds, it's the equivalent to Oh, I love these. Okay. It's the equivalent to 38,217 emissions. Okay. It's equivalent to 38,000 cars worth of emissions every year. So,
38,000?
yeah, 38,000 annual
Okay.
emissions of a vehicle.
Yeah.
And it's also the equivalent of 210,000 acres of trees worth of emissions that they can sequester. So think of the
Those are
expanse of
two,
land.
and that's equivalent to how much food waste you have kept from happening, basically,
Yes.
since your inception, right? And just took two. And what year did you start?
So we started in 2020.
So in 3 years, the work that you've done just actually started off as just a little project and has blossomed so quickly is equivalent of 38,000 of the emissions from 38,000 vehicles,
Mm-hmm.
or the carbon sink, if you want to say, of how many
Mm-hmm.
trees?
Of
212 acres, I think you said. 200.
yeah,
Yeah.
210,000 acres.
210,000 acres.
Yeah.
So yes, that's massive, and I love that. Thank you so much for. I know that was. I could. If someone told me to look something up while I was on being recorded, my brain freezes. So you're very good at that.
I'm always thinking this way. No, it's so necessary, and it's something I really care about is making these metrics accessible. I think there's such a drive for environmental communication and impact reporting, and
Mm-hmm.
it's only meaningful if it matters to someone in a
Yes.
context that means something. And
Yeah.
so I'm
Right.
always tinkering with ways that we can better communicate and localize the effect that we have and the impact that we have. And specifically with food waste, you brought up that if food waste were a country, it would be the third largest emitter. And the reason why this is significant is because when food rots, it emits methane. And methane is a
I
very,
don't
very
think I
potent
knew
greenhouse
that.
gas. Yes.
Okay, so because I want to back up and just say that again. All food, so any kind of agricultural food waste, it's the same as
So
cow
yeah,
farts, if
methane,
I will, or
you're
burping,
absolutely.
belching is actually more the, yeah.
Hmm.
It's a
So
methane gas. Okay, go ahead. You say.
organic waste releases
Mm-hmm.
methane gas through the natural decomposition process. So it's, of
Mm-hmm.
course, an organic process, but when it
Mm-hmm.
sits in a landfill, it's not being reincorporated back into soils, right? That's the beauty of
Mm-hmm.
composting. That's the beauty of any upcycling solutions, or better yet, Farmlink, that actually makes sure that the food doesn't ever go to waste. It's being consumed
Right.
for human energy.
Mm-hmm.
So it's converted before it ever gets to the methane component. So there are many greenhouse gases that are emitted in general in the agricultural
Mm-hmm.
system, but specifically with food waste, methane is the um, greenhouse gas of focus. And it is important that we call it what it is, because methane
Mm-hmm.
has a super warming effect over a shorter period of time compared to
Mm-hmm.
dioxide. So we put things in equivalencies in emission reporting, but I really like to delineate them because methane matters now. The
Mm-hmm.
recognition of methane's impact and warming impact matters now, because we need to understand, or at least from the IPCC's latest report that came out just a little over a month ago, the AR6 report,
Mm-hmm.
we have a narrowing window of time, a narrowing window of opportunity is how they put it, to mitigate the effects, the cascading effects of climate change. We know it's
Right.
happening. It's going to
Right.
continue to happen, but we have a narrowing time that we can actually soften the blow. We can build infrastructure, and we can alleviate the inflammation of this problem. And one of the fastest ways to do that is reducing food waste. So us at Farmlink, we're like, great, let's get to it. Let's keep going. Like we
Yes.
know it's there and we're seeing it. We from dollar to pound to emissions avoided, there is a direct impact from when you prevent food from going to waste, and therefore the negative or the climate impact that it has if it does release methane. So just for reference, methane is 81 times stronger than carbon over 20 years,
Mm-hmm.
specifically for organic waste. And so I like to point that
That's
out just because it has such a significance in this window of opportunity that we have to really move the needle on our climate reality.
It's a phenomenal figure, 81%. And the only reason I even know that, even though I have read and studied and listened to Paul Hawken for years and read Drawdown, which, by the way, the book Drawdown is a really great way for people to, by Paul Hawken, it's a great way for people to really dig into all these different climate solutions. But I think food waste was right. I know it was right at the top. It was in the top 5, even when they did that research a few years ago. I don't remember exact number, but
it was number 3. You're exactly right.
It was 3. Okay. So, but 81, but it wasn't presented. Well, people present that number differently when they talk about methane, but I had a guest who was an old friend a few, I don't know, quite a while, a few weeks ago. And he said, could you tell people that number 80% or 81%? He said 80, but because people, it's not coming across how big and important and the 20-year marker really matters as well.
Yeah.
It's still hard for people to get this, but I think the thing that people need to get is that food waste it's not just the farmers, right? It's not just what their issues are with shipping their produce. It's what we throw away every single day. So by just not throwing away your food, by trying to just buy what you need, eat what you've bought, whether it's your favorite thing or not, if you're concerned about the environment at all, that should be one of our top priorities. And everyone's focused on cars and buying electric cars, and it's important to focus on transportation. It's another huge one. But this is so easy and accessible. Like literally today, their next meal, your next grocery trip, you can make a difference.
Yeah.
So
I mean, food waste happens all across the supply chain, up and downstream, and we are firm believers in consistency, but we also recognize that so much is just built into our system. And so while individual action and education is paramount, and we all should be thinking about this and can help each other learn more always, there are major solutions that we can implement in our food system structure that can actually start to design this food loss and waste out. And so that's what Farmlink's trying to do. We're trying to shift the system so that way the burden doesn't fall on the individual at the end of the day, but it's a collective effort from seed to bin.
Yeah, that's good. No, it is systemic, but also if people don't understand it, it affects where you shop, who's supporting what kind of methods. So, if I think we just have to, as much as the systemic need is going to move the needle the most, but it seems like that's made up of a lot of individual actions along the way too. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Hey, and that's the food system.
Yeah.
I was just going to say the food system, the beauty of it is that there's so many players. And so collaboration is at the core of any systems change.
Yeah. Collaboration is the core of everything, isn't it? When it comes down to it, we can do so little all by ourselves, but well, okay, I'm going to shift gears one more time because I really want to go back. We've talked about Farmlink, but let's kind of really start at the beginning of how this started. The backstory. Can you talk about the founders and just it's just a great story. So you can
absolutely. I love
how
the
it
story
began.
too.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah. So our founders, James Kanoff, Aidan Reily, and Owen Dubeck, were all sent home from school, and
because of COVID.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so at the same time, so Aidan and James grew up together here in Los Angeles, and so at the same time of being sent home from school and learning about how to make waves in the system at school, we were all sent home and witnessing the devastating reality that there were freeway passes of lines of cars of people lining up for food at their local food banks, and food banks across the United States were in the highest demand we've ever seen. And at the same time, there's reporting of coming out the breakdown of our food supply chain. There was gallons of milk being thrown out, and chickens being euthanized, and eggs being thrown. It was just absurd. It was truly absurd to witness both happening at the same time.
Yeah.
And it begged the question of, how is this happening at the same time? isn't one like exactly what the other needs.
Yeah.
And so James and Aidan and Owen, who is actually our creative director, but just launched a film about our origin story that's
Oh,
releasing actually
really?
this. Yes, called Abundance, the Farmland Story, and it's
Wait,
releasing this week.
this week?
Yeah, that's our
Oh,
we're talking about it publicly this week, and in terms of like full access, I believe this summer is really when it's going to start to come out. So, but it
and can you
chronicles,
say that? Can you say the title again?
yes, Abundance, the Farmlink Story.
Okay, and where is that available? Going to be available? I know it's not yet.
It's most likely going to be available on YouTube and this summer. So stay tuned with that, but
Okay.
reach out to us as well.
Yeah.
We're happy to share some
Yeah, I'd love
screening
to share
links.
that. Okay.
Yeah. But the whole film, it's 23 minutes and it chronicles the early stages of Farmlink. And it really was, um, you know, they get like the three of them asking each other, let's do something about this. Let's just,
Mm-hmm.
we know that they found out that their local food bank in LA was in need of eggs. And so they're like, you know what, let's just create a spreadsheet of farmers.
Hmm.
Um, and they just, went down the list, started calling.
Oh,
And
really? Just that's how they started? Just calling farmers to say, "Do you have something extra?" Because they had nothing to
exactly.
do, right? They weren't working, they weren't going to school, they were home trying to entertain themselves during. Yeah,
Yeah. And
that's
it
what.
was one of those moments, and our founder, James, has said this before, is like, you look at each other and you say, like, we're going to remember this point in history. And you're going to ask, like, what did I do? And how
Yeah.
did we move through that
Wow.
challenge as a collective? And how do we show up for one another when there is
Mm.
signs of uncertainty? And
Yeah.
so it really did start that way. So there was this reporting of all the different farms that were, being forced to throw out their
Oh.
hard earned and grown food.
Mm.
And so they literally, exactly as I said, down the list, calling hundreds of farmers, asking, "Hey, hi, this is James Kanoff. This is Aidan Reily. Do you have surplus? Any leftover food? We're trying to connect to our local food bank." Lots of cold calls and lots of rejections,
Yeah.
until we finally got an answer. And our first response was an egg farm that had plenty of eggs, and they said, if you can come get here and pick it up, they're yours. And so they decided, all right, let's rent a U-Haul and let's drive
Oh.
up, pick up the eggs and drop it off at the local food bank. And
Hmm.
that's exactly what they did. And there's a great shot of Aidan driving the truck U-Haul on the freeway, going like 20 miles an hour, trying to just get there
Not break
safely
the
and
eggs. Oh,
make
getting
sure.
there. That's getting there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning. It was, connect
God.
one farm to one food bank with one U-Haul. And that's really how it kicked off. And then it was just a flywheel effect with students and friends of friends. Ben Collier, our CEO now, went to Brown with Aidan, like quickly got looped in, brothers, sisters, friends,
Mm-hmm.
neighbors, just getting involved, all calling farms and just trying to build out a
Wow.
database of contacts that Farmlink could be a support with. No farmer wants to be throwing out their food. That is like
No,
such a loss.
think about that. That's
Yeah,
just think about if you make dinner and you have to throw it out, how upsetting that is for some reason, just like one little meal, and just imagine throwing out tons of food. It would make you sick.
exactly.
Um, and so all these people that were getting connected into this organization, they were all college students or
Yeah, high
everyone. So
school
everyone was
and
like, oh, hi.
college.
Oh my gosh. So the ages were like what, 16 to 21 or something? Very
That's
low,
right.
very young. Yeah. And wow, this is such a great story. So then that just started building, I guess, over the next year or two. And so what happened when school started again?
Yeah, absolutely. That was the crossroads moment for our team, um,
Yeah.
which was, the problem is actually worsening. We uncovered that there is a deep systemic challenge here that
Mm-hmm.
is not just because of the pandemic, but truly is something that
Mm-hmm.
is going to continue when we go back to school. And so it was really a poignant inflection point for the Farmlink Project team, where James and a handful of other students, one by one, just unenrolled in university and
Did
took
they?
off. Yes, took off and asked themselves the same question again. At what point, how could we walk away from this? We are starting to see this momentum, and we see the need, and there is no better time like the present to tackle this problem that we care about. So hundreds of students joined in suit, and all leaned into our project.
It's really hard to talk about this without getting emotional. I saw that they did CNN did a little thing on CNN Heroes, because they've won so many awards already. Let's talk about that for a second first. They won the two of them. I don't know why just two of them won the Congressional Medal of Honor.
That's right.
Freedom. Yeah. That's of honor. Yeah. And then also, I know they won another one, the Jefferson Award from the Multiplying Good Foundation, which is a very prestigious. They won Forbes 30 under 30, well under 30, it should say. And other awards. And they just started I'm sorry, you told me already, 2021 or 2020 did it start? 2020. So yeah, but that was like 1 and 2 years in, they're already winning all these awards because the impact has been so massive. But the CNN, so I just, after I found I later found the CNN, just doing some background research, and I was watching that, and I was just like, there's everything I could do to get through that thing without just losing it, because I don't know, there's something so pure about it, and something so, we always make everything so hard in life, and it's like, why can't you just do this? It's like, oh, okay, let's just do this, and then this changes the world. It's just there's so many levels on which this is illustrative of what one person can do, what two people can do, but what a collaboration can do, and what just looking at the obvious can do. I think that to me strikes me more than anything. Obviously, we're throwing food out, like you said before, we're throwing it out, and there's people hungry. This is an obvious problem. And why it took college students this many years, not college students this many years, but why it took this many years, and it took just some kids not going to school right now to figure it out is a pretty good question. I think that should make us think a little bit too. Just that question should be thought about. What else are we missing that's just so obvious and such low hanging fruit that could change the world so much.
So many people don't think hunger is a solvable issue, and we firmly disagree. There's plenty of food, and we're trying to demonstrate that one truckload at a time. We know it is a solvable issue, and we want to see hunger end in our lifetime. In the United States, at least one country at a time. And if we can empower other people around the world to think the same thing, and to set a different standard of a quality of life. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is very simple. You start with the physiological needs: food, water, warmth, rest. That is the basis of an individual's ability to move through this world and thrive and be able to elevate through the hierarchy of needs.
Right.
And food is one of the most beautiful ways to show love. And I am a firm believer that if we can, address hunger, a lot of other problems are going to start to fade away, or at least alleviate in a lot of ways. It exacerbates so much to not be fed, and we're living beings, and it's we believe in the right to food and the right to feel full and healthy.
Yeah. Well, to say that it's not possible is just ludicrous. If we can, all the things we can solve, I think we can solve this one little mismatch of, it just, nothing is unsolvable. Nothing's unsolvable.
And that was what was so exciting about it, is it's not that we don't have charitable people and we don't have the infrastructure for food distribution in the United States, and we don't have enough food. We actually, all of those things are there. We just need the logistical know-how and the connection, the link. The missing link is what was really the gap in this ability to create those pathways of fresh food to our food banking networks across the United States. So really a logistical challenge is an exciting one, because that's just a coordination and understanding of where the points of surplus and need are.
And believing it can be done.
And the will to do it.
Yeah, the will is everything. Well, the will comes from the belief, right? So if you don't think it can be done, it's hard to come up with a will. But if you absolutely say, of course it can be done, then yeah, you find it. So what does it? I don't know if you want to go into the details of this much, but just in general. So now we're talking not just a few guys with a pickup, with a rented U-Haul, or I guess it was U-Haul. How is this happening now that you're talking? How many, I'm losing the numbers about how much food is being distributed. Is it, I don't want to guess. Tell me again.
To date, we are over 118 million pounds of fresh food.
Wow. Okay. Wow. So how is that happening now? Is it raised at the sophistication level? We don't have to go into all the details, but I don't think it's these guys and a rented truck anymore.
I definitely want all listeners rest assured there are no more students driving trucks anymore. We have, actually very soon after we got our first exposure and launched our website, we receiving donations from $5 to $10 at a time to then corporate donations that really allowed Farmlink to pay local truck drivers or truck driving networks. So we work with professional drivers that at the time in COVID, a lot of them were out of work. So it was also a really great way to get our transportation community back in business. And so to date, we still work with an amazing community of drivers that are truly our connectors, and they are incredible and are working on tight turnarounds because, as you know, produce is perishable. So we move efficiently and with a strong promise of delivery. So we are very grateful that we now have a much more sophisticated transportation process. Yeah.
So, and then is it done because are you in every state? Did I see that? Or contiguous states anyway? States. 49 now. Okay. So does everyone have their own, like, do you have a chapter in each kind of state, or how does that work?
No, we don't have a chapter in each state, but we do have agency partners across the United States. So I believe we're like over 250 agency partners now. And
my
for
goodness,
reference, those are food banking organizations that are then connected to their own networks of food pantries and churches and mosques and schools.
Right.
And so our food agency partners are our hubs, the nodes of local food distribution. And so those service typically regionally, like by state, but some are able to, independent ones are able to transfer across state lines too.
So are you getting produce that's within a certain area close to the food banks though? Like, would you be taking food from Wyoming and taking it down to Mississippi, or are you trying to put food in Wyoming and keep it in Wyoming, for just to name the state?
Oh, I'm so glad you brought this up. Our priority is to make sure that we are servicing the points of need near the points of surplus, because that's such a
makes sense.
A catch-22 to be taking the food so far, and I mean, that is the reality, is that food is grown in where food is grown, there are the most food insecure are the communities right around it. So that is actually the devastating truth of our food system, as well as that, our farming communities are some of the most food insecure as well. And so definitely globally, that is the truth of it. And so we prioritize meeting the need locally, but we also, there's a couple variables to consider when finding the destination agency partner that has the capacity to receive the produce that we've recovered. So Farmlink works in really high volumes of produce. So think anywhere from 10 to 40,000 pounds at a time. So those what's it called, signposts can kind of shift a little bit, but on average it's a high volume of food. So
Okay.
we are working with trying to make sure that we can access those agency partners that have the capacity to receive that much. So it's a fine-tuned tinkering balance, but we have an
A
amazing
lot of
team
logistics. Yeah.
that are
Yeah.
really attuned to striking a balance to make sure that we're servicing local and communities, but also getting it to those far
The bigger
remote
ones.
communities as well.
So they take it and distribute it. Your partners take it and distribute it to the smaller, like you said, the mosques, the churches, the schools, the
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, local ones. Okay, so you're taking the big thing and it's trickling down just like it's designed to do.
Yeah.
That's very cool. That's very cool. So what do you, I know it says something on your site about, and you've alluded also to the future and to this systemic change. Is that a change from what we've been talking about? Are you thinking about um, bigger fish to fry, so to speak, looking into
So,
the future?
yeah, looking into the future, I mean, our mission is to make the world's abundance of food accessible to everyone. And as I said before, it's what are we going to do with this abundance of food is really where we're thinking. And so
Mm-hmm.
our mission is, of course, like by my metrics, it's we have one goal there, but systemic
Yeah.
change we believe is really about creating connections and collaboration across the hunger fighting landscape. And that really is our theory of change for the future. Our goal is to scale up to provide 1 billion pounds of fresh, nutritious food to families across North America by 2025. So that's our goal. But we know that reaching 1 billion is going to take a refined and dynamic collaboration with agency partners across the US and farmers that we are not working with yet. So systemic change really means reaching a point where everybody has access to food with dignity and consistency. That's our definition of systemic
That's
change, is
beautiful.
that we shift the relationship with access to free food so that it retains the sense of dignity that we all feel when we get to go to the supermarket. And so consistency is also crucial, right? Is not needing to worry about where your next meal is going to come from.
Yeah.
And so we know that we can't reach that goal just by getting to food banks. And I think something I'll just share anecdotally is that up to 60% of people that are facing hunger who know where their local food pantry is will still not go. And that is something that we are really focused on, right? Is what's it all for if these communities do not trust or access the organizations that have the fresh produce that we can distribute to. And so
can't trust, is that the issue, or is it pride? Is it, like you talked about, dignity? Is that part of it? Because why would they not trust if someone's giving them food?
Absolutely. No, it's a combination of trust and pride. I think shame is a better word for it, is that there is a sense of shame and stigma that surrounds handouts. And so we believe in the full human and the right to feel dignified by taking care of yourself and your family. And so, yeah, we've met students that 1 in 3 college students are food insecure, and
really that high a number. Oh my goodness.
So we talked to students that lived in a van down the street from campus and down the street from a local food agency partner that we work with, and for one reason or another, there's not a sense of trust with that organization. And even though that we know them and we have worked with them, we have a different, working relationship with them compared to the community member that is living in a different reality. So it's really important to Farmlink that we are able to really meaningfully improve the last mile and the experience that we can, really encourage a one that is connective and trustworthy. So it's very important to us that we rely on the full life cycle of the food experience, where we are
Mm.
providing the resource from the, working with farmers that are donating their food. We facilitate the movement of that. It's really important to us that we also invest in those food banks and food bank partners that are servicing the individuals at the end of the day, so that we can actually shift that percentage of individuals facing hunger to seek out what's available, and do so in a way that they feel supported and celebrated as a neighbor.
That's a tall order, because that might be the toughest nut to crack here. Because I can really, now you're talking about societal influences on people, and those change very slowly. And like you said, if there's a certain idea in many cultures, I think maybe in all cultures, about the feeling shame about having to ask for a handout. I mean, this is a universal. I would also be embarrassed to go in and ask for a handout, and might put it off as long as possible. So I really appreciate that you are looking at every nuance of the, like you said, the life cycle of the product and the produce, and getting it into the hands, even if it's a societal issue that has nothing to do with food distribution. So sounds like a very tall order, and I love that you're doing that. I'm so impressed with your organization, because it's just every single thing has been thought about in such a short amount of time. It's a little bit mind blowing, and I think it speaks to your youth that nobody seems to have these antiquated, or not even antiquated, but just a little bit old ideas of how things work. It's like, no, let's do this with a new, fresh mindset, and the impact is just, I have chills hearing you talk about it. I really do. I'm curious too, just about your specific role there. As head of, I don't know if you call it the head of sustainability, if that's your actual title, but what is that like? What are the specific things that you're working on in sustainability that are important to you and to the
Yes.
organization, obviously?
Yeah. So really exciting. Over the last couple of months, we have been investing a lot of time and research into refining our quantification of our environmental impact. So that 380 million pounds that I talked about at the beginning of carbon equivalents that we've prevented, that is all.
Sorry, carbon what?
Carbon equivalents.
Oh, equivalent. Okay, yeah.
Yes. So that was all possible through research of different waste modeling that can that pretty much outputs the methane generated from the amount of food, the type of food, and where the food is decomposing from like a climate perspective. And so we've been working on that to be able to create a calculator for Farmlink that takes into account how much methane would have been produced if this food was not picked up. What is the footprint of Farmlink's operations ourselves, right? We have transportation, we must factor in our impact, and to then output our net impact. So we have made the executive decision to work with the IPCC's waste model, which takes into account, it's a really great tool that they have launched a while back for countries to be able to quantify the food impact as well, the amount of emissions. And so we have integrated that internally for our own donation movement so far. And from there, we've been able to create an impact metric, which helps us better communicate like the dollar value from both a hunger fighting perspective, but also a climate benefit perspective. And that's been my focus, and is my focus moving forward, is how Farmlink can better create the connection between fighting hunger and food access, like our first question, and sustainability, right? They are interconnected, intertwined, completely synergistic themes and topics and realities. And so my goal is to better communicate the impact that we have by every pound, as well as where we're going and what that means for the system at large, and how Farmlink specifically orients ourselves within the international goals to reduce food waste by 50% by 2030, right? How can Farmlink speak to those goals and specifically and tangibly contribute to those goals through our operations, so that way we can, be allies in this incredible opportunity to reduce food waste that we both know is our fastest and most effective way to draw down emissions right now.
Can you repeat that goal, and who set that goal? Is that a UN or an IP?
Yeah, there's goals all across the world, but the drawdown has a goal, the UN, the EPA, all to reduce food waste by 50% by 2030. So there's great calls to action that we want to, align our strategies with, so that way we are a part of the larger movement that is doing that. Yeah.
So you're fitting into the largest goals set by the world together, and you're going all the way down to the one guy who doesn't want to go to the place down the street because of a poor experience he had. I mean, that is a full circle operation, I have to say. Really, really impressive. So that's I can see exactly where you're headed, and I'm going to be following what your progress is on that, because I think it's so. I mean, how fun is it? Just fun. I don't know if fun's the right word, but it is fun to think that like what you're doing is literally changing. This is literally changing the world, but literally the impact of where we're headed as a planet. You have a significant hand in crafting that story.
It's a great privilege.
Fun is not the right word. Yeah, it's a privilege.
It's a great privilege. And I feel very fortunate that I am in the position I am, and that I have the ability to recruit students that deeply care about fighting hunger and really preserving this planet that sustains our lives. And so I feel very fortunate to have the resources to share with other people. That's most important to me, is that we invite everyone in. There is room for all of us, and we need all of us to really believe that change is possible, to then, drive change. I think that's my goal, and way to pay it forward is really, I've been so lucky and grateful to be able to apply my passions for this every day at Farmlink, and to be able to work with such a spirited team that believes in change. And really, we are excited to continue to invest in people that want to see the world differently. And I'm just very grateful that I get to wake up and do what I do every day.
Well, you're lucky and we're lucky because you can sleep better at night knowing. And are you mostly students? Is this a mostly student? Because that's a piece that I'm not quite getting, because you've heard of students. I see students on your website, but is it all still students working there?
Not all completely, but it is the majority of students. Yes.
So people who are going to school and working there at the same time?
That's right. So we have 2 fellowship programs that are integral to Farmlink today. We have the Root Fellowship and we have the Field Fellowship. And the Root Fellowship is running the operations of Farmlink. It is the original participation of Farmlink, the operational force behind Farmlink's ability to do what we do. So the farms team calling farms and reaching out to growers, the sustainability team working with me to quantify our environmental impact and better support other movements and understand our position in the greater ecosystem. There's the policy team, operations, product. So it's an amazing way for students in high school and college to get involved and really have hands-on experience with running a nonprofit that delivers millions of pounds every week. So that's one side of the fellowship. And then we have the Field Fellowship, which is pretty much Teach for America, but for the food system. We just launched it this year, and we believe, you got to be on the ground to understand the problems in local communities to, generate solutions that are nuanced and near and dear to the community, and working with the community members that have solutions themselves, and actually just need facilitators or connectors to resources. So our field fellows, we have a group of 9 who are all positioned around the U.S., addressing specific projects that they design to meet communities where they are for food system solutions. So it's a really exciting dual fellowship program that we have that really is the core of Farmlink, because it really is about the people that come through here that move, that really will shift history the way that we see it in our food system, and will go off to be leaders in their own right and create their own Farmlinks and innovations that really perpetuate this dream of ours to make the world's abundance of food accessible.
Wow, well, that's a perfect note to end on, I think. Just so much hope and I have so much respect for all of you. It's really one of the best organizations I've heard anyone talk about, because it's so circular, it's so holistic, it's so forward thinking, so solution oriented, and so positive. Like every single word that you've talked, every single sentence that you've said, or the words that you choose, they're all positive, they're all forward thinking, they're all there's just a feeling that this is a happy thing, a positive thing, includes everybody, fully inclusive. And so, I mean, it's kind of like if you were to sit down and figure out what everything you'd want, it kind of hits all the boxes. So checks all the boxes. So, thank you so much, Julia, for sharing all this with me. I can't wait to share with other people. I can't wait for people to, get involved in whatever way they can, just locally, with their own food system in their cities or towns. And how can people, can they donate? Is there a place on your website? I'm sure there probably is, for donations, and I'm sure that you could use as many as possible.
Absolutely. Yes. So you can find us at the farmlinkproject.org. You can also find us on social media. We are active, and we're tuning into where we are and what we do, daily operations, our impact so far on socials, Farmlink Project. And you should just know that with every dollar donated, we enable 22.5 pounds or 21.5 pounds of food and 73 pounds of carbon equivalents avoided. So there is a tangible impact for every dollar donated. Know that you are making a difference in enabling meals and positively benefiting our environment. So whether it's donations, your time, your care, your voice, there are many ways to support Farmlink and support the food system and our mission behind it. So whatever you have to offer, we welcome you, and there is a room for you in some way. So check out our website. There's lots of ways to get involved, and honestly, call us, email us, DM us. We'll respond, and we're really excited to meet you all and talk to you.
Well, thank you so much, Julia. We'll be following you, and I'll share all those links so that if anybody goes to the show notes, you can get to all the social media, to your website, to anything that we talked about that's relevant. Thank you so much. I wish you so much success in the future, and we will follow along.
Thank you, Deborah. It's great to meet you.